This is, ladies and gentlemen, a breaking news edition of Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. I am Dan Bespris. You can find me on social media at Dan Bespris on Twitter and Old Man Squad on Blue Sky. And I don't want to waste any time on this one other than reminding you all to please hit like and subscribe to the channel. But the breaking news is almost breaking news, if that makes any sense. This just in, as of about 1 hour ago, the Sacramento Kings, this is per Shams Charania on X, the Sacramento Kings are expected to open up talks to potentially deal all-star De'Aaron Fox ahead of the February 6th trade deadline, sources tell ESPN. There will be plenty of suitors, but it's believed that Fox has a target destination in mind ahead of 2026 free agency. There are follow-up tweets, by the way, confirming that the target destination is likely the San Antonio Spurs. I contemplated in the aftermath of this news breaking whether or not this warranted a full-length show or just a short. I ultimately decided that we were going to do one of each. A short that in 45 seconds tries to explain what the hell is going on, and this show, the full-form edition that, again, I hope you guys are enjoying, and I hope you will subscribe to the channel to break down what really might transpire here on the De'Aaron Fox front. There are a lot of moving pieces. For one, the Kings are probably going to want to continue to compete after a potential De'Aaron Fox trade. So the first thing is this trade even going to happen? He's not a free agent this offseason. He's a free agent next offseason, but he's basically indicated to Sacramento that he's not going to sign an extension there. So the Kings could play this a couple of different ways. They could get more for him by trading him early because he's under contract for a full additional season before hitting free agency, or do they wait it out, hope that maybe he changes his mind? Or, I mean, you see this a lot where teams feel like they're getting fleeced, and so they just say, screw it, I'm not going to trade you anywhere right now, and we'll try again all offseason, all next year as well. So this show aims to answer, what do you do if a trade goes down? What should you be ready for? Because there are so many different avenues that this could take, we're going to focus on him ending up at the place that it sounds like he wants to end up, which would be the San Antonio Spurs. And right now, the Spurs, what do they send back? It's hard to say. Most folks that are talking about this on social media are involving a third team in the process, which also seems conceivable. One thing that I think jumps out is if Fox is gone, first of all, we have to assume that somebody important or marginally important comes back, in addition to likely a haul of picks. But the guy that's been the closest to value on the Kings but hasn't had it lately is Keon Ellis. So is there now a reason to potentially move Keon Ellis onto your trade deadline stash board on the assumption that De'Aaron Fox gets traded? I don't know if there's quite enough data there to say that we should, because let's say that, let's say that the Kings make a deal involving San Antonio that also involves a third team, and basically any guard comes back to Sacramento, that would put a damper on it. Still, on trade deadline morning, and here's the other side of it. Next week, we are going to be advising you all on this podcast to save your moves to use when a trade goes down. This week, the week before the NBA trade deadline, is the week when you can use moves to make speculative stash plays. Now, in Roto, you can do whatever the hell you want. The games cap means you don't really need a moves cap. So usually you're not working with both. In head-to-head, if you're stashing, this is the week to do it. Because next week, you're not going to make a bunch of stash plays on Monday and hope they hit and then not have moves left on Thursday morning when actual trades are going down. You want to have all of your moves available on Thursday morning next week, so that way when something crazy happens, you can make the ad that you know is going to be a better one, or at least have a pretty good idea of it. So to that end, I would say, yeah, I think Keon Ellis is probably worth a stash right now. He played more minutes in the Kings' last ball game. Admittedly, Keegan Murray was dealing with some foul stuff, and he was kind of in and out of the rotation for just a couple of quarters of basketball. And lately, Ellis has been more in the 20-minute range instead of the 30-minute range. But again, like, what if the Kings decide to hold De'Aaron Fox out of a couple of basketball games? I don't think that they will, but we don't know. So the first thing that I'm doing is I'm going and likely stashing Keon Ellis. Again, it's not mandatory. If you don't have any space for him on your roster, I totally get it. But he's the guy that moves into fantasy value very quickly if anything goes down involving De'Aaron Fox in Sacramento, anything that opens up some guard minutes, or frankly, even small forward minutes, if it came to that, on the Sacramento Kings. He's the next man up. For basically everybody besides Domantas Sabonis being out of the lineup, the next man up is Keon Ellis. And he's really like 4 to 5 minutes a game away from being a super consistent fantasy producer. So it's a pretty easy number to get to, especially with all of this stuff swirling. Beyond that, I don't know that there's anything you really need to do with Sacramento. If De'Aaron Fox gets moved, Malik Monk probably becomes more of the de facto everyday point guard, which is great for his fantasy value. Domantas Sabonis is already orchestrating a lot of the offense. He would likely do more of that if Fox is gone, and Keon Ellis is the guy that steps up. That's a ton of extra shots for Monk and Murray, and a few more for Sabonis. And, the list goes on and on and on. And DeMar DeRozan will end up doing more. Almost forgot about DeMar. But those guys are already on rosters, so it kind of doesn't matter and doesn't really impact anything as far as this show is concerned. Keon Ellis is the guy that's available in a lot of fantasy leagues. He's only 13% rostered right now, even after a pretty good ball game on what was that, Monday evening. He's been trending down so hard since the Kings got healthy that he's available in most fantasy leagues. Not all, but many. As far as the other side is concerned, this is kind of impossible for us. And so before I do that, I just want to remind you guys that this show is brought to you by our buddies at Bet Online, the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, Bet Online is your ultimate game day companion, taking you through the Super Bowl to NBA, college basketball, NHL, and UFC right now. That's what's going down, making Bet Online your number one sports betting source. Every touchdown to three-pointer to hat trick, BetOnline has you covered with odds, stats, and more, including live viewing, for every game, every play, and every win. BetOnline, a great partner for us. The game starts here. So I think my big takeaway is Keon Ellis more than anything else. But there's also other pieces at play. If there's a 3-team trade, you can't really prepare yourself for that. If you're just thinking about the San Antonio side, one would have to assume that Chris Paul gets moved in such a deal. He didn't go to San Antonio to be De'Aaron Fox's backup. I'm sure it'll be super fun for him to just plop in there, play a handful of minutes. But Chris Paul wants to be a part of something, whether it's, growing with a young team, which is what he's doing right now, or chasing a ring. So Chris Paul's value likely gets weird, probably goes down. If he goes to Sacramento, he probably plays less than he does in San Antonio. If he goes somewhere else, a third team, a crapper team that buys him out, and he lands somewhere that's going to give him backup point guard minutes, maybe plus a little bit more, his value, again, goes down. So a trade to San Antonio, I think no matter how you slice this, ends up being kind of bad for Chris Paul. It also ends up being kind of bad for basically everybody in San Antonio not named Victor Wembanyama, although more so for Chris Paul than the others because he gets displaced as the point guard. But guys like Devin Vassell, Jeremy Sohan, etc., and so on and so forth, Harrison Barnes, Fox's former teammate, if these guys are not also moved in a deal, feels like Harrison Barnes would almost have to get moved, but I guess we don't know for sure. Like contractually, they can find other ways to kind of piecemeal this thing. Where the hell does he go? Probably someplace where he plays more, oddly enough. Not enough to where I would ever consider stashing Harrison Barnes, but he's actually probably a guy who ends up, because in Sacramento or in San Antonio right now, he's behind Wemby, he's behind Vassell, he's behind Sohan, he's often behind Chris Paul just in terms of touching the basketball, even if field goal attempts might be higher on many nights. Chris Paul's getting the assists that are leading to a lot of those. So for Barnes, who's basically the fifth wheel in San Antonio, he probably ends up someplace where if he's a bad team, he's probably like a third or fourth wheel. If it's a good team, He might also be kind of in that fourth guy zone. But again, not at all relevant, not at all someone that you're picking up in case this happens. If we get a dark horse suitor for De'Aaron Fox, I don't think that there's much that we should be doing relevant to that right now. Other teams that are in the mix, we've heard the Miami Heat mentioned. I don't know that they have the assets to pull this off. We heard the Brooklyn Nets mentioned. They do have the assets to pull this off, but it does feel kind of like they're jumping the gun, a team that's deep into a tank right now. I don't know why they'd go get a superstar to shut down and be part of the tank, but I guess it's possible. And in that instance, all it really does is it kind of blows up all these weirdos that weren't doing a whole lot anyway. And that ends up being really good for Keon Ellis because whatever comes back from Brooklyn is probably not going to be a high usage guard. And frankly, I don't know that there's anybody going back that the Kings would even want all that badly, other than, maybe like a Cam Johnson. But where does that push everybody? Does that push Monk down? I guess that's a possibility. It does feel a little bit far-fetched. Because that's want to get assets for these guys. They don't want to give up these. They don't want to give up the assets that they have going into. Excuse me, I think my mic screwed up. Going into a rebuild, I say going into a rebuild. So to pare this thing down, I don't think we need to go much more than about 10, 11 minutes on this news, which we're at right now. On the news of this De'Aaron Fox basically asking out without truly asking out, it's basically like, I'm not going to re-sign here, so if you guys want to get something for me, now's the time to do it, which is interesting when players want to be somewhere else so badly that they just want to jump the gun. Because if he waited for free agency and then went to a place like San Antonio, they wouldn't have to give anything up to get him. They'd keep all of their assets and the team would be better, but players want what players want, and they want it soon because that's how we all operate as human beings. When you want something, you don't want to wait a year and a half. So here we are. I would say put Keon Ellis on the stash board. And for those that have watched my shows over the last week and a half, you guys know that some of my favorite stashes, guys like Ayo Dosunmu is on the board. Denny Avdia, who's already been picked up in most places. Donovan Clingan and or Robert Williams, depending on what goes on. These are other Portlandites that have kind of made my board over the last little bit. I think you can put Ellis on there. And I think, again, he's likely to be doing enough here in the short term that he's worthwhile to roster even before a potential deal rolls out. And again, use your stash moves this week. Save your moves next week for actual trades that are going down. Hope this helped you all. Again, I know it's not a full-length show, but it did kind of feel like we needed to get something out there. Big news, man. Jimmy Butler's probably on the move before the deadline. De'Aaron Fox might be on the move before the deadline. These are star-level players that are about to shake up the foundation of the NBA, and that's super fun for all of us. Shout out, by the way, to UnderdogFantasy.com. We're not going to do a full read for them on today's quick hitter show, but we'll get you back on the next one. Bet Online, again, that's our partner for today. I am Dan Bespris. Follow me on social media if you don't already. We talk about all this stuff all day, every day. DANBESBRIS on Twitter. Old Man Squad. There it is. On Blue Sky. If you made it to the end of the video, the rule is you have to hit the subscribe button now. Please remember to like on the way out. Comments welcome. I try to address all of them when I can. Have a great day. God, I love the NBA. Drama never stops. We'll see ya.